Alright, Thursday, which means it's time for another video, which means I have dogs walking around. I've got Oreo box behind me full of assorted stuff I've collected over the years, and like actual from the tap A&W root beer because I was running errands this morning before recording. So anyway, this is going to kick off my senior year, which I still don't have a word for it yet. I guess change, transformational, last one. Listen, high school, senior year especially, you've made it through most of everything. You're on the downhill slope. Senioritis starts hitting. People start turning 18. We're becoming adults. We can vote and we can do all this kind of stuff. And then, life hits us. And that's joyously wonderful. And now it's our turn for my class of 2002 comrades. There is actually another part that I talk about in this section, this video, one of the chapters. Listen, I was a senior 2001 into 2002. There's something that happens in there that I have to talk about. But it's also kind of a beginning of us all noticing the world around us, and now, listen, I'm an older millennial, and now I've lived through a worldwide COVID thing and weird election cycles and tons of other things, and senior year other stuff happens. But also something happens that's closer to home in terms of my friend group and the people I know, and that is talked about. And there is something that I will address at the end of this video that I will feel needs addressed when we get there. But we still have a couple of pages to go before that happens. And so what I will do is I will sprinkle in, the photos where I can. For those of you that remember the grand old days of senior pictures where we would get 6 or 7 or 8 photos and one would end up in the yearbook and the others we would hand out or whatever. I'll probably put one here or whatever that I can find. But anyway, senior year. Searching for a heart. Searching high and low for you. Trying to track you down. Senior year was not starting off as I thought it would, even just a week before. But as with each year before, change was not something that surprised me. I was now the co-president of choir, sharing the honor with Shell. We'd both gotten the same amount of votes, and Wendy loved the idea of us sharing the title. Shell and I worked well together. We always got along nicely, and she was always so wickedly talented. Matt, I want you to keep me in check from time to time, Wendy said. I know sometimes I can be a bit short with people, and so when I am, you let me know. Her and I had clashed briefly a few times the year before, so the request I found amusing and humbling. You sure about that? I asked with a devilish grin. Yes, I'm sure. Choir council that year consisted of myself and Shell, and we were joined by Andrea, Brandon, Danielle C., Michelle T., Melanie G., Swathy B., Diana G., and Jennifer A. We would help plan events, club outings, and be a liaison between the choir and Wendy. We would also help plan the end of the year banquet and awards and yearly funny awards. Another change was the influx of talent into Downbeat that year. Just this huge, for lack of a better term, youth movement that was absolutely amazing to see. Returning from the year before were Brandon and Stephen and Emily and Kate and Shell and myself. Kate and Shell were joined by Maddie and Alicia in the sopranos. Altos saw Diana and Jackie R., Natalie G., and Teresa M. join the ranks, with Corey G. joining the tenors and Brandon B. and David D. joining me at bass. Also, joining me as a bass was Xandar. After years of showing up to school to hang out before Downbeat, now Zan was in Downbeat, and I was ecstatic. The lineup of Downbeat would change as Steven would leave after the new year, and we would be joined to tenor by Brandon M. and Stephen C., who, after a year off from choir, would return for our second half. Meanwhile, in the other choirs, Meg would be in Shantae as an alto, joined by Sarah, and Ashley would join Shantae as a soprano. Personally, one of the things about my senior year Downbeat that bugged me was that Andrea didn't make it. Not, I wished she replaced someone, let me be clear. I wish she was in Downbeat in addition to everyone else we had in there. I loved Andrea, and she and I picked up that year right where we left off. Granted, hanging out from time to time during the summer usually helped, but when the school hosted an open house and Wendy asked for volunteers to rush to the front to try and coax people to come to the performing arts wing, it was Andrea and I. Andrea and I were these two short-statured powerhouses at times, and we climbed onto a bench trying our best to pull people in. When that didn't happen, we did what came naturally. We sang. So we stood there on a bench singing Good Riddance by Green Day in a cappella, us trading off melody and harmony, something we'd worked on over the summer. One of the few modern songs that I knew and learned, and we pulled it off perfectly, getting a few people to follow us back Performing Art Wing to sign up for choir. We loved singing together, and I would have loved the chance for her to shine in Downbeat that year because her talent definitely excelled to place her there, and her personality would have fit perfectly. On the other side, the academic front, I signed up for a biology science class with Corey, Putman, and Wes. American government saw myself and Meg in a class together for half the year, and then when that was over, I had economics, but Meg and I didn't share that class. My friendships with Jen, Matt P., and a new friend introduced me by Zan, another Matt, but we called him Ani, would grow through that year as well, thanks to the simple fact we all just shared a lunch hour together. I also had a 1-2 punch of interesting English-based courses, humanities and creative writing. After getting my schedule finalized due to a mix-up, I walked into humanities a week into the semester, and Mrs. Cam cheered. "Matt, you're in this class?" she asked, brightening as I entered. "Yes, I am," I said with a grin. "You asked. I'm here." In something that caught me off guard, Mrs. Cam gave me a quick hug and then announced to the class, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited to introduce Matt into this class. He engaged with me in such wonderful discussions and debates in American Studies, and I feel he could lead the same here." I looked around, I saw a few familiar faces, and Mrs. Cam continued, "I want everyone to be able to sit where they want, so there's some free seats available, but if you want to sit on the floor, front and center, you can do that too." She pointed out the fact that the desks were in 2 sections, one on each side of the room, with a bit of a pathway in the middle. "Anywhere I can sit that's free?" I asked. "Anywhere," she reiterated. I walked to the back of the room, put my backpack on the back counter, jumped up onto the counter, and leaned up against the back of the windows. "Got it." "Then that's your official seat," Mrs. Cam said, marking it down on the seating chart. "You can also be the official window closer when we need it." And that was humanities. A class of discussions on topics wide-ranging where debate and ideas were encouraged. I met Sophia M. and Amanda M. in that class. Pam's younger brother Chuck was in the class as well, and I could instantly love the course and the ability to debate. A class where, when watching a video about the Vietnam War and Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth began playing, I sang with it from the counter and was joined in by a dozen or so classmates, much to Mrs. Cam's surprise. One of the most memorable and long-lasting parts of that class, though, was just simply walking into humanities. Each morning, Kirsten S. would be at the door, holding it open for people, just hanging out in the hallway as we'd walk in. "Good morning, beautiful," I blurted out one day, seeing her standing at the door and smiling and waving at people. "Hey there, handsome," she responded with a smile. And that is how we greeted each other every day that year before class. We would get to know each other a bit better in humanities, but it was the only class that we shared. And we loved to talk about school, the world, class together. Sometimes she'd pop up on the back counter and talk to me. "Good afternoon, handsome." She'd call down the hall to me from time to time, and later in the day as we'd pass by each other. "Afternoon, beautiful." I'd bow my head back. But every day, like clockwork, walking into class, we'd have a smile for each other. A simple thing that was always the bright spot. Creative writing was an entirely different beast altogether. And outside of choir would be the most memorable of that year, but also one that is memorable amongst all the other classes I took at Mountain Point. Mr. Anderson was up front with what the class would be. Lessons on different styles of writing, poetry, short story, screenplays, and then a lot of free time to work out our ideas. We would have a project due each quarter, but a lot of time in the class would be used to work toward them. And he encouraged group work and talking. There were so many memorable pieces to this class, and the writing and the people. This is the only class in 4 years at Mountain Point that I shared with Brian other than choir. Emily and Kate were in the class as well, keeping our trio together. Mandy was this bombastic young woman who had no problem sharing her opinions. Heather D was quiet spoken, but as the semester would continue, she'd become someone I would get to know even better throughout the year. Felicia D was this bright, warm person who always had a smile when I saw her. Finally, there was Kelly H. Kelly had been a friend of Emily and Adrian, Kate, and others, and had moved sophomore year. But I'd not really had a chance to hang out with her. She just moved back. And the first day of school in creative writing felt like a bit of a reunion, while also setting up a memorable year. All these young ladies took up a single line on the far right of the room. Kate first, and then Emily, Heather, Mandy. Felicia sat next to Kelly in the front seat of the second row, and then at the back was me. Emily was the one who reintroduced me to Kelly, and there just seemed to be something quick and natural to us becoming friends. Like with most of my friends, I can't tell you exactly what it might have been. It was just one day you didn't know each other, and the next day, well, you're friends, sharing laughs and inside jokes. And with Kelly, I was more than happy to be the butt of a few of them, meeting each one with a grin and a laugh. But it was also what we would tackle in creative writing that would bring us together further. With the final year of high school underway, the first seeds of senioritis could be planted in the minds of a lot of us. There was some awkwardness, but Meg and I were working hard to be friends and in each other's lives, even if what we thought a few weeks before were now polar opposites. It was easy to just get sucked into another high school year, the last high school year, but I wanted to make the most of it, to see just how memorable it could be. As transformative as the years before were, I wasn't sure how they could be topped. But my senior year was up to the task. And quite quickly. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies. But now those skies are threatening. I woke up on September 11th, 2001. Got dressed and got my stuff ready for school in Downbeat and walked downstairs. When I got to the bottom of the stairs and stepped into the living room to grab my wallet and keys and a soda out of the fridge, I glanced at the TV, which Sarah had turned on, and noticed one of the World Trade Center towers smoking and on fire. "What the fuck happened?" I asked. "A plane hit the tower," Sarah replied. "Like an accident?" I followed up. Her voice was flat. "They don't know." I grabbed my backpack and headed out the door, walking around the apartment complex parking lot and onto the school grounds. I passed by the beach club, cut through the open gates, and to the door where I went for Downbeat. Only a few moments after I arrived, the door opened behind me. "Matt," I heard Wendy say, and she had already tossed her keys and I caught them midair. "TV," she said. Yeah, you got it. I unlocked the door of the choir room and turned the TV on to NBC News, and Wendy walked in seconds later. Anything? She asked. Just them talking about it, I responded. We could hear more footsteps, and Mr. Werner seemed to pop his head in. Band and choir students were starting to show up, and Wendy was getting music out. Are we going to practice? I asked. She nodded. We'll check in a little bit. When everyone else showed up, Zan and I quickly exchanged a few words on the subject. We did a warm-up as downbeat, but then turned the TV on again. And the second tower had been hit. Wendy stopped rehearsal, and we as a choir, but more importantly a group of friends, sat and stared at the TV. It's an attack, Zan said, and I nodded. Mr. Werner came back in, and he and Wendy stepped out, and we continued staring at the TV. When Wendy came back in and the room started to fill with other choir students for a cappella, an announcement came over the PA system of the school. This was a bit of the gist of the announcement. Teachers and students with the events transpiring in New York City were asking teachers to suspend their usual lesson plans for the day. Students who wish to leave for the day may. Those who wish to stay may, of course. We will continue to follow the normal bell schedule that attendance and tardies will not be taken. We just ask that should you stay on campus, you do so with respect to fellow students and teachers who wish to continue to be here. A few minutes into a cappella, the door opened, and Meg walked in, her face flush. She handed me a note, which I opened immediately as she turned and walked out. Matt, I'm going home. Please call me when you get home. I love you. Meg. I ran out after her and caught her going into the band room. I'm scared for my mom, she said, crying as I hugged her. Is she flying today? I asked, and Meg didn't answer. Okay, I'll walk you out. We cut through the band room and I grabbed Meg's stuff, carrying it out with her. She got to her car, put her stuff in, and gave me a hug. Call me when you get home, okay? She asked, and she buried her face in my shoulder. I'll call you at lunch, I said. Okay, please do, and if I don't answer, I might be just trying to lay down or trying to get a hold of my mom. I love you, she said. I love you too. Meg got in her car and drove to her house, and I went back to the band room where both Aaron and Corey were waiting for me. Corey hugged me first, and then Aaron, hers lingering a bit. Jackie was next. Mr. Werner, you okay if I hang out for a few? I asked. Absolutely, he responded. I stayed in the band room and I talked with Aaron and Eric and Corey and Jackie, and toward the end of the hour I went back into the choir room and we're all still glued to the TV until the bell rang. Walking into second hour humanities, I exchanged quick highs coming in and jumped onto the counter to take my seat. And listen, I know this might sound repetitive, but the day was class after class glued to the TV. Kirsten and I talked about what was going on. Mrs. Cam was trying to address it while also watching it unfold, and it was all horrible. I've been a news junkie all of my life. Politics have always interested me, and this was one of those moments that you knew you were living in history. For my parents, the question was, where were you when JFK or MLK were shot? Or the moon landing? Or the Challenger explosion? I was old enough to remember and watch the Oklahoma City bombing. And this was the same. At lunch, Matt P. and I discussed foreign affairs. It seemed to be the obvious thing for us to talk about, as we both followed the news closely. Creative writing was, again, watching TV, writing if you needed to process it, but being together. The section of my girl friends and I just all grouped together. This was a time where being with your friends and the people you cared about was where you gravitated. When the day was over, you just felt burned out by everything you'd been watching. But I came home and called Meg, and her mom was safe. Meg was okay. We exchanged quick I love yous and chatted. And as days and weeks passed after the event, the news continued to cover it, and there was talk of war. And in some of our classes, we had guest speakers, or would try and tackle aspects of what the day was and what it could look like in the future, and all of us agreed. It would all look a lot different than September 10th did. And as the nation and the world-changing aftermath of September 11th, 2000 was, it wasn't the only thing that struck hard. Around the same time, Ashley had told Sarah, and then me, that she had been diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Being a sophomore that year in high school, she met it with a myriad of reactions. Anger, fear, humor, and all of it courage. My sister, to her eternal credit, took on a lot of support at that time. The two were nearly inseparable most of the time, and Sarah and my mom would visit Ashley in the hospital. With me, though, Ashley and I would continually, playfully flirt with each other. To be clear, you have to stick around for a while, I told her. I kind of got used to having you around. 'Cause you like me, she said. 'Cause I love you, I replied. Ashley would have an operation that would attack the cancer, and when she recovered, her voice was not the same, but she stayed with choir, and her and Sarah continued to be close. They reminded me of a version of me and Blaine at times. She was family, never just Sarah's friend, and her ribbing of me always came with that sisterly love, but not overly sisterly that we shied away from flirting. When she had recovered and had been over, we did have a chance to talk a bit deeper than usual, and she talked about her voice change. It took some getting used to. I mean, you had a sexy voice before this, I told her, giving her hand a squeeze. This is a whole new level of sexy. Sounding like the future father of my children, she said, with a wink back in my direction. A nickname she had for me for years. If bravery needed an avatar, Ashley was it. I pictured a rainbow. You held it in your hands. As September moved along, creative writing was becoming quickly a favorite class of mine. Aside from all the time you got to write, it was just the people involved who made the days memorable. Kate and Emily were always a blast to be around. Felicia and Kelly were quick to become friends of mine. And with some self-deprecating humor, I was always happy to get them to laugh. And when given the chance, I'd learn more about Felicia and Kelly, and it was through Felicia that a topic of conversation came up. Kelly's just moved back and she's been going through a bit of a rough time, she told me one day. I think she wants to get back more into like the high school fun stuff, going to football games, stuff like that. Oh yeah? I asked. Yeah, Felicia responded. I think she's just a little nervous since she just came back after being gone for a few years. Emily seemed to echo the same sentiment. The group of friends that had known each other from elementary school had been reconnecting, of course, but it still seemed to have this feeling that there was just something missing. As creative writing continued, Kelly and I would seem pretty seamlessly to open up. She shared feelings about her move. I told her about my breakup with Meg. So we had a chance to build this like budding friendship, and one day before creative writing started, I leaned into Emily. Emily, do you think Kelly would want to go to homecoming? I asked her. Emily's face brightened. I think she would. Nobody's asked her? Felicia quickly joined the conversation. No, I think she thinks no one may ask her. I said. Matt, Emily began, if there was anyone who could give Kelly a great time at the dance, dinner, no pressure, just a fun time, you would be the perfect guy to do it. By this time, Kate had joined in the conversation as well, and it quickly turned into a planning session to test the waters and see if in, the next week or so we could work it out. We all got back to our seats, and Kelly came in, and the class started in earnest at the bell. All right, everyone, we'll do 10 minutes of journal writing, no topic, just go with what you want, Mr. Anderson said, and we went right to work. As we wrote, Emily, Kate, and Felicia kept looking at Kelly and then at me. And I shook my head. If they were trying to be subtle, they were being absolutely horrible about it, but to my luck, I guess, Kelly wasn't paying attention. It went unnoticed by her. With 10 minutes gone, Mr. Anderson gave us a chance to share. A few people raised their hands. We had some creative chapters to stories or just some introspections. Kelly shared and a few more others from the class. One last call, Mr. Anderson announced. All right, I'll give it a shot, I said, leaning back in my chair. It's not exactly my forte, but I did attempt something more poetry lyric inspired than a short story, if that's okay. Of course, Mr. Anderson replied. I can't remember all of what I wrote, but the last couple lines are etched into my brain, and as I read the final lines, I could feel my hand tremble. So, for Kelly, I take this chance. Will you go with me to the homecoming dance? I read. I'm not a poet. There was silence, so I looked up, and I could see Emily, Kate, Felicia, and Heather staring at me. I looked at Kelly, who first registered surprise, a bit of embarrassment, I don't blame her, and then an unforgettably warm smile. Yes, she said, nodding. There was applause, and Mr. Anderson seemed touched. Well, how about that, he said. As the class broke up into discussions and plannings for short stories, I let my adrenaline and nerves subside. When the bell rang at the end of class, Kelly and I agreed we'd work out all the details the next day at lunch, and she and Felicia stepped out to the hallway to head to their next class. As they did, Emily hung back as we walked into the hallway. No way did you just decide to write that poem today, she said. How long have you been thinking of asking her? About a week or two, I responded, grinning. That is so cute. I just want her to have a good time, I said. It's not like a date. She's going with you. I know you'll make sure she has a great time, Emily reassured me. Or die trying, I responded. The music does the talking, says the things you want to hear. Leading up to the first choir concert, there had been a few moving pieces in the choir orbit. Meg and I would still chat during the school day, and she told me she'd gotten a solo for one of the songs in Shantae, and we would spend time working on American government homework, while I hoped that whatever was going on with us would resolve itself, admittedly with us getting back together. She did think it was cute that I asked Kelly to homecoming, and that for now she wasn't sure if she would actually be going. Our tech crew was beginning to grow as well. As Ann Putman and I took lead, we brought back Ron and also added David and Corey to it. It was a week before the choir concert when, during a break between downbeat and a cappella, while talking with a group of friends, I noticed a young girl sitting up against a wall by herself in the choir hallway. Hi there, I said, galloping up to her. You mind if I sit down? Not at all, she said with a smile. Thanks. I'm Matt. I'm an a cappella and downbeat. Kelsey, I'm an encore. Freshman then, right? How do you like choir so far? It's been fun. Listen, choir my first year can be a bit tough, but if you love it, you need to stick with it, I said. I mean, my freshman year, I ended up in a sailor suit. Really? She laughed. Yeah, but it was completely worth it. As the bell rang, signaling it was time to get to first hour, Kelsey began to stand, and I stood with her. And hey, I know how it can be in the beginning choir, so follow us, Fells. Look off stage. I'll be there to cheer you on. I'd catch Kelsey in the hallway from time to time, and we'd chat. Choir, school, whatever it was. Admittedly, I think I had a bit of that feeling that maybe Blaine did. Maybe what he felt back in the day, seeing a young choir kid sitting in the hallway, not sure what to expect. If there was one thing I wanted to keep doing, it was make anyone willing to step onto that stage feel like they belonged. The first choir concert of the year was October 4th, and tech crew was there early. Zan and I handled the soundboard and the mics, and Putman and Ron worked on the risers. David and Corey helped with the piano setup, and choirs would file in to practice and hang out in the audience until it was their time. We would have the concert recorded, but it seemed that, after the previous Pops concert, Wendy had realized having our tech crew work alongside the group recording was probably a good idea. After getting things set up, I ducked into the backstage area and jumped to the left. You're still doing that? Putman asked. First concert of the year, you think I'd stop? Fuck that noise, I responded. The concert kicked off with Downbeat doing Madrigal Set, and it was the first time Zan and I took the stage together in Downbeat. Our group that year was another fine, talented group, and amongst the guys I could see a great shift in the talent. We knocked out a trio of songs, and, I can still remember some of the opening chords to them. They are just that stuck in my brain. And then Encore took the stage. As they did, I hung out backstage, and as luck would have it, Kelsey was on the last of the riser next to me at the backstage area. You all sound great, I whispered between songs. Downbeat and Encore passed each other as we took the stage for our jazz sets with Straighten Up and Fly Right and Love Walked In, two pieces I actually found in a folder years later. We were followed up by Shantae and the final song, The Rose, a song made popular by Bette Midler. Meg ended up with the final solo, which got a resounding cheer from me backstage along with the rest of our group. Amazing, Meg, I said as she walked off. Thanks, she responded. Men's chorus was next, and a cappella closed out the show with 4 pieces, the last of which was in a more up-tempo version of Elijah Rock, which was fun for me to revisit, the song losing absolutely no power or loss of favoritism of mine in the years since we performed it the first time. As the concert came to an end, there was a resounding feel of positive movement with the choir and seeing the talent coming up and the new talent displayed in Downbeat. The future, it was really bright. Dancing in the aisles and singing out loud. Leading up to the homecoming dance, I noticed interesting thoughts and emotions at the time. Firstly, as we readied for the dance, I noticed that Brandon A. from choir and Kelly had been talking and seemingly getting along, and since, I'd been in the mindset that Kelly and I were just going as friends, I'd approached her that if she, had a feeling she wanted to go with Brandon, I'd completely understand. She declined, and when we got to the dance, we were welcomed by assorted friends. I'd figured I'd been pretty clear. I'm not looking for a romantic date. I'm still processing the breakup with Meg. I had no interest in pressuring Kelly with anything since she'd just moved back and gotten out of a long-distance relationship. So going to homecoming, senior year, it just felt like a fun social norm. The theme for the dance was Hard Rock Homecoming, and Kelly, she was amazing. She wore a black dress, and I wore a takeoff of what I had worn for Pops the year before. Black dress pants, blue t-shirt, black suit jacket. We got the obligatory picture out of the way, and looking back, it's one I've always really liked. Kelly struck me always as someone really cool and great to talk to, and a multitude of conversations to have with. Funny, she was quick-witted, and as the year continued, I really, really liked her writing. I found her to be my favorite person to read things to or hear things from in creative writing. And personally, the other thing about this photo, and I understand the ego in this statement, I probably looked my best here. Like, joyous teenage acne and my psoriasis weren't an issue. My summer PE had ended and I was in decent shape, and I looked a little bit more mature than my usual denim and t-shirt getup. Senior year, in theory, is that bridge, that last bit of being young and getting ready to break into the world, and this is the first marker of that. It was also a picture I remember a few friends asking for a copy of when pictures were handed out later. We danced with each other, with friends, and I remember it just being a fun night as both Blaine and Tammy had come back as well. Tammy as Zan's date and Blaine as a female friend's guest. Unlike the past 2 years, it never seemed too awkward to me, that angst of where does the night go or how the other person might feel about me. Kelly and I cracked jokes, most about me. We talked about school, friends, and the year that faced us. And as the dance wrapped up, we walked together out of the school. We said our goodnights, and after she left, I turned to make my way home, running into my sister. "Hey there," I said as we walked together. "Hi," she said, a bit of a grin on her face. "Did you have fun?" "I did," I said, watching her face. "Did you?" "Yep," she said, matter-of-factly. "Okay." "You have to promise not to tell Mom and Dad," she responded. That's always a promising start, I replied. And you can't freak out. I stopped and took a step and turned. You promise? She asked, and a bit of vulnerability had crossed her face. I nodded. Mouse, big brother honor, I promise. Okay, I found a guy and we danced a bit. I don't like him though, but we made out, she confessed. I smiled. Okay, that kind of thing happens, yeah, as long as neither of you, feelings are getting hurt. Just be honest. I know, she said. Did you just meet him tonight? I asked. Yeah, but I've known of him, she said as we turned into the apartment complex parking lot. But you know him better. My curiosity piqued, and I nudged her with my shoulder. Uh-huh. It's Brandon A. from Downbeat Acapella. Come Monday morning, Brandon did everything he could to run from me, thinking I was about to unleash Big Brother justice. But all I could do was laugh. Choir kids, I tell you. Didn't look to be a serious bite. Will you wait here till I come back to life? We're going to be working on short stories, Mr. Anderson announced in creative writing one day. It'll be your first project of the year, 3 to 5 pages, and we will be breaking it up into peer review groups so you can get some edits and hand in a final draft. I was lucky to find Kelly in my small group along with a few classmates, and the idea of tackling short stories right out of the gate was exciting to me. The only kicker was I only really ever worked on one genre of short stories. And I was notorious for not finishing them. I would start them, get half to 3/4 done sometimes, and then just file them away. Maybe with a deadline, I could write something and actually finish it. But it was also high school, and parameters of the assignment hadn't been discussed. I have a question, I announced, raising my hand. Yes, Matt, Mr. Anderson responded. Subject matter-wise, what are the guidelines? Anything you want, he replied. Language? I asked. Try and keep it relatively PG-13, though most of you can get into R-rated movies. Just don't be explicit, he added. All right, last one, I said. How violent can these things get? I remember he stopped and looked at me, and I could sense other eyes as well. Matt, what exactly do you intend to write? He asked. A zombie story. He paused and then grinned. You mean like Night of the Living Dead? Yeah, exactly that. Again, don't go overboard, but have at it, he replied. Welcome to creative writing, everyone. Create. I felt energized, and I began to actually plan out the story and characters, something that was also just a little bit foreign to me. With most of my zombie writing, I'd primarily written with friends as the heroes, but I wouldn't do that here. A denim-clad, crowbar-wielding hero would also be a dead giveaway that it was me, so that was out. I wanted to create something new from scratch for this story. I rode the energy as well that my teacher even mentioned my favorite movie, and I think Emily, Kate, and the rest of the ladies could see my brain firing. And with that, Derek Stryker and Striking Back were born. The character of Derek Stryker was a school teacher from Chicago who, in the early days of the zombie epidemic, lost his wife Autumn, and now traveled from place to place in an RV armed with a crossbow and a pair of handguns. As a nod to Blaine, he was blonde and wore a black trench coat. The story is 4-ish pages long of him happening upon a Kmart and a small horde of zombies and a lone survivor, female named Tara, who he is able to get out, gunning down zombies and firing his crossbow the whole time, making a couple obnoxious action/horror movie quips in the vein of Bruce Campbell. The duo drive off in the sunset to the sounds of Van Halen while hoping to find more survivors. The story was short, quick to the action, and descriptive in its horror. It admittedly is a story that is a bit rough in spots. I was 17 when I wrote it, but it is the one to this day I'm very proud of. It's a quick read. It's meant to be as a high school assignment, but I also know I was building something. Derek and Tara would live through the end of the story, and they could be interjected into a project later. I came across the original handwritten draft and character outlines, and when we presented them to our groups, I awaited the feedback. As a horror kid, I knew it wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but all the same, I waited. "This is good," Kelly said to our group. "Being a horror story, you can't say it's realistic, but it's good and intense," Samantha added in. In our editing group, we'd all reach each other's works, and it was Kelly's story, specifically a line from it, that has always been something I've remembered and carried with me to this day. So when I was reading it and got to the whole makeout scene, that line where she reaches at his belt, I said, "And she felt a cold metal object." That phrase, cold metal object, is so good. If you didn't have a title, that's it. I don't know why the phrase was so memorable. It could just be because of how it foreshadowed the turn in the story about a love gone wrong, but it just stuck. I swear, if I ever join a band, I would name the band Cold Metal Objects because of that line, I told Kelly. After submitting stories for edits and grades, we as a class were able to select readings from other students. We had our graded copy and then a class reader copy of the final draft. My story made the rounds, and I was surprised at the feedback. "It's a lot different from writing about all of us," Kate said, "but it's really good." "What are you going to do with it?" Emily asked. "I haven't figured that out yet," I replied. "Right now, I'm just going to enjoy the fact that I did it." That's exactly what I did. And I got great feedback from Mr. Anderson, receiving an A on the assignment. I took it home, poring over the fact I had written something that got such good feedback. I shared it with Meg, and she enjoyed it as well, happy I'd found something I was so proud of finishing and sharing. I'd always wanted to write a zombie story that people enjoyed, and handing it out in high school class wasn't being published, but it felt great. Then it hit me. Maybe I could publish it. So I jumped onto the homepage of the Dead website and submitted the story. I figured the worst that could happen was that it would get buried in a heap of other pieces. So every couple of days, I'd log on to read other works, and there it was, Striking Back by Matt Wintz. It made me smile. And then I noticed a star rating. My story had been getting reviews, and was sitting at 3.5 out of 5 stars. Not only was my story seen as above average, it was being well received. I put a little feather in my cap. I wrote something that was well received, published online, albeit on a niche message board, but published. And then I got an email. "I loved your story. Will you be writing a sequel?" came the email from a user. It wasn't the only one. Within a few weeks of me posting the story, I'd gotten over a dozen messages complimenting the story and asking if I would consider doing a follow-up. I hadn't, but now I had no plan to not write a follow-up, so I did. A sequel set 6 years into the zombie universe in which Tara and Derek now had a child and a second on the way, a community of fellow survivors, and yet still more threats to overcome. Finishing that one and submitting it found more feedback and a higher rating. I had felt like I had completed what I wanted to do. A check mark off the dorky bucket list I had, and something I'd worked at for almost 6 years. I had published a zombie story. I saw a werewolf drinking a pina colada at Trader Vic's. His hair was perfect. Crystal's Halloween party that year saw me don a pair of khakis, a blue polo, a toy shotgun strapped to my back, a sock over my hand, and covered in more fake blood. Ash from Evil Dead 2 was present and accounted for. Blaine took great glee in dousing me with fake blood, which Crystal politely had to ask me for the second straight year to wait until it had dried before attempting to sit anywhere. With our friends dressed up in the occasional ghost or ghoul or fun character and Rocky Horror Picture Show and horror movies playing on the TV, we were all having a good time. Blaine and I had come together, and Zan, David, and Putman met us there. A chance for the 5 of us to all be together, which usually led to brotherly ribbing and insults. It was also at this party, in between games of pool and jokes, that I met a young man who was newly enrolled at Mountain Point, Cody D. We exchanged pleasantries, and I internally found a bit of humor that he struck me as someone who looked like Blaine a bit, though gifted with a little bit of facial hair. We struck it off okay, but he seemed to bounce from conversation to conversation. The guys noticed he spent a lot of time talking with the girls at the party, even though he had brought his own date. "What do you think of him?" Blaine leaned in and asked. "Not sure," I said. "Seems nice enough. Maybe a bit of a flirt, but I doubt the ladies mind looking at him." The house would occasionally be stopped at by trick-or-treaters, and if anything, our group loved to see what kids were dressed up as. By midway through the party, I had thrown on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and trying to stay off furniture and away from other people to not get them bloody was a game that I was just done playing. After a bit of an attempt of wiping the blood from my face, though, I was a bit of a stained mess. We went through the night dancing to the time warp and quoting movies, screaming at jump scares, and just spending our time together. The 5 of us starved guys took time to go outside and hang out together, enjoying the trick-or-treaters, and came by through different portions of the evening by our female friends. As the party wrapped up and people began to head out for the night, Meg offered me a ride home. My heart leapt. We took time to talk and just have time to ourselves. We hadn't been hanging out as much. We were still traversing how we felt for each other in the breakup, but we were determined to make at least our friendship work. And our conversation turned a little bit to Cody. "He was a bit of a flirt," Meg said. "Yeah," I agreed. "Maybe trying too hard with the group. I don't know if it works for him, but he's new to the school." "Yeah, I guess this is his first week," she said. She dropped me off at home. We said our goodnights, and I waved as she drove away. Within a week, her and Cody were dating. And I was crushed. A pointless thing, devoid of grace, where you don't know what you're after. A few weeks later, the week following the choir retreat, at the end of American Government, Meg asked if I could meet her in the performing arts lobby. I agreed, and when I arrived there, while some of our assorted friends and classmates milled about, and she stood with Cody, as soon as I came around the corner, she began walking up to me. I could see something was up, and I paused. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked. "I wanted to talk to you in person," she began. "Okay. You know Cody and I have started dating." "Yeah. But in order for that to be given a chance, we need to take a step back," she said. "Like hanging out?" There was a pause. A long one. "Meg?" "Like us talking," she replied. I shot a look at Cody. I could feel myself getting angry. "He doesn't want you talking to me?" "He hasn't said anything about it," she replied. "This is from me, and I need you to do this for me." "You want me to stop talking to you?" I responded. "Matt, I know what I said, and I know that I don't want to hurt you, but for right now, I think it's best if we don't talk. We don't be friends." "I'm sorry. What?" I asked, flabbergasted. "You're talking about not wanting to hurt me, not asking me to do this for you, and your ask is to stop talking to you and treating you like you're my friend?" Part of my head and brain snapped. I adjusted my backpack and I could feel like the world was looking at me. This felt public. This felt like a setup. I felt like this was the moment that sides were going to be taken. Fine, I replied, trying to put as much believability as I could to the statement. You know what? You do what you need to. You figure it out, whatever. But I will always consider you a friend, and if you ever need me, ask. And if this is part of it, fine. You got what you wanted. I turned and walked out. I wasn't I wasn't waiting around for the aftermath. The aftermath didn't take long either, or so it felt like. I felt alone. It only took a few months into the school year for things to shift seismically. Kate, Emily, and Meg all had new relationships, and in some instances, it's all I heard about, and now with Meg's request, like the end of a friendship outright. Zan and Putman followed me out, asking what happened, and I could only get out a piece. They asked if I needed anything. Not right now, I responded. They followed anyway. When we made it home, we made nice with my folks. Just another day at school, walked upstairs. We didn't get the Mordheim stuff out. We didn't turn on a movie or a video game. We just sat there. What happened? Putman asked. I laid it out, and when finished, there was silence. Fuck, was all Putman's response. Again, brother, what can we do? Zan asked. I shrugged. I don't know. I can try and change your mind. I can let it be. I can sit here and try not to think about it, or it'll be all I think about. And another option? Zan asked. Let's go to the football game tonight, I sighed. Let's just get out of the house. So that's what we did. We sat in the stands of the Mountain Point football game that night, with Meg and Corey and Aaron and Eric and all the other marching band friends playing from their spot in the stands and getting ready for the halftime show. High school football games are another chance to hang out with your friends, and the game itself is secondary, but it had already felt like the wind had changed. Matt P. and Ani sat with us, and we talked about war games and politics, but the only other person that came up to us that night was Crystal. Matt, do you have a second? She asked. I nodded, and we stepped off for a bit. Yeah, Crystal, I asked. I heard about what happened with Meg, she said. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, it doesn't seem fair and it sucks, she replied. Yeah, well... Hanging on the subject was deflating. She gave me a quick reassuring squeeze on the forearm and then walked away. I returned to the guys and we talked, and after the game went our separate ways home. I sat in my room, turned on the music, and stared out the window. A week or so later, in the same room, at the same window, and lit by that damn lamppost, I felt like the music gods betrayed me. Things had just continued to go downhill. I felt iced out by everybody. It may not have even been true, but there was nothing to make me feel the opposite. People were growing up and growing apart and having new experiences, and I felt stuck. In my room, I had shuffled through a series of notebooks and I found a small, green, spiraled notebook that bound a journal from the past, and with nearly a year and a half gone by since my last entry in it, I grabbed a red pen and started to write. November 18th, 2001, 9:33 p.m. 99.9 is playing your song and all I can think about is Meg. Yeah. First off, long time no see. I just pulled out a stack of notebooks and this just so happened to be in it. It's sort of funny to listen to how I was even a year ago. Wow, so much has changed. Well, it seems like my freshman year of prophecy of being alone at senior prom will come true. Meg and I were going to go together. Now we barely talk, so, dances with her is out of the question. I'm lost. You hear me? I don't even know where the fuck I am. don't see me right now. When I look back at this moment years from now in this journal, my memory better spark. You realize, Matt, that if you're still here, you're goddamn lucky. You realize you're not alone. Find yourself, keep everything. You read this 6 months from now after everything's changed. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what you've lost. At this moment in time, I'm writing to keep you going. You remember every REO, Speedwagon, Styx, and Journey song you hold dear. You remember your love for your friends. You can't do this alone. Hell, present this as a classic case of a breakdown. Hell, give this to someone right now and tell them you've lost it. You're nothing. Come on, get so angry you can't even believe that you're angry. Look what you've done. You failed everyone. You don't talk to Pam or Diana or Nathan or Adrian, do you? Your writing's a joke. You know it. Everyone knows it. Why do you think everyone's abandoned you, you fuckhead? Put on your jeans and your white t-shirt and your jean jacket. That's not gonna help you. Look for help. I dare you. What are you doing? Writing out your anger? You've got nothing left. I have nothing left. You have to fight yourself. You have to fight yourself to find yourself. Help me. Something in me broke. I slammed the notebook down and my head hurt. My arms, I could feel them trembling. I could feel myself mentally losing control. It was past 10 at night. The house was dark, and I stared at what I'd written. My handwriting had changed. It looked foreign to me, but also familiar and important. I had to fight myself to find myself. Where did that come from? But if it was a fight that was going to be needed, then I wasn't going to back down. No matter how long it took or what it took. I reached into my drawer, pulled out a knife that I used to cut my models off their sprues. I opened it, and I cut across my forearm. I stared at the blood as it began to rise to the surface of the cut, and I was surprised that the pain I felt in the moment was minimal. But the control I had over the situation was mine. I stared at the blood and then at the knife, at first surprised at what I'd done. But the fight didn't feel like it was over. I'd always wanted to be a hero. And in every pop culture reference I knew, movies, comics, literature, wrestling, heroes bleed in a fight, and pain never bothered them. So, I cut my arm again. As blood rose for the second time, my stress began to subside. Not completely, but the relief was there. Music didn't do that, or talking it out with friends, or writing, or painting. This did. So I did it. One more time. Sitting there, bleeding, I made the decision that this would be my plan going forward. I would continue to cut myself, and often multiple times in a sitting, nightly, for the foreseeable future. And that's where the writing ends. And this is where it's important for me to interject this, so that there is no confusion or, thinking something that isn't there. This is nobody's fault but mine. I began struggling with certain aspects of my mental health in my junior high school years. And it was as soon as the 7th grade that I knew, with the help of a counselor, that I had a penchant of and mental thoughts of hurting myself. There can be no misinterpretation here that this is not anyone's fault. No one forced this on me except for me. And when writing about this and writing the story, I was trying to figure out if this was going to be something that would shock people or need to be told, or if it was something I would just leave where I left it during high school, and that was just quiet. And so I decided that no, in order for me to write this story, I had to tell all of it. And this is the start of all of it. Be good to yourself. Keep on rolling.